Wyoming Territory, 1878. A woman stepped off the train into blinding snow, clutching a letter that promised a new life with a man she'd never met. Daniel Reed was supposed to be waiting. Instead, the town sheriff met her with 3 words. He's been dead 2 weeks. No husband, no home, no way back east. The townsfolk whispered, another mail-order bride nobody wants. But one man stepped forward, the richest, most feared rancher in Wyoming, a man who'd locked himself away for 6 years after his family died. She'll work for me, he said. His voice was cold as the winter wind. Nobody knew why Jacob Cole Brennan would suddenly take in a stranger. And nobody knew the secret that brought them together, or the darkness hunting them both. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories of second chances, healing and love found in the most unexpected places, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more untold Western tales. Your support means the world to us. Now let's journey back to 1878 Wyoming, where a woman with nothing left would become the one who saved them all. She'll work for me. Mail order bride. Arrived a dead groom, then the richest rancher claimed her. Philadelphia wore winter like a funeral shroud. Jesper Thompson knelt in the snow outside the brownstone that had been her prison for 3 years, her bare fingers clutching a single piece of paper. The ink had run in places where her tears had fallen during the train ride from the lawyer's office, but the words remained clear enough. Mrs. Thompson is hereby evicted from the premises of 47 Chestnut Street. All claims to the estate of the late Robert Thompson are forfeit due to her criminal negligence, resulting in the death of Rose Eleanor Thompson, aged 5 years. Criminal negligence. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Through the frosted window, she could see Victoria Thompson, her sister-in-law, standing in the parlor, where Rose had once played with her dolls. The same parlor where Jesper had taught her daughter to read. The same room where she'd sung lullabies on winter nights just like this one. The door opened, not to invite her in. Victoria stood on the threshold wrapped in the black silk dress she'd worn to Robert's funeral 2 years ago. She'd worn it again to Rose's memorial service. She seemed to save it for occasions when she wanted to remind Jesper of everything she'd lost. You're still here. Victoria's voice carried the crisp disdain of old Philadelphia money. I thought I made myself clear this morning. Victoria, please. Jesper's voice cracked from the cold, or perhaps from begging. She'd done so much begging these past 3 years. I have nowhere to go. Just one more night. I'll find work. You'll what? Victoria stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her, as if Jesper might try to force her way inside. You're a widow with no references. No family willing to claim you. A woman who let her own child burn to death because she was too deep in her laudanum sleep to hear the screams. The words hit like physical blows. Jesper had heard them before, whispered behind gloved hands at the memorial service, shouted by Victoria during their many arguments, hissed by her own conscience in the dark hours before dawn. I didn't take laudanum that night. The protest was automatic, worn smooth by repetition. The doctor gave me nothing stronger than willow bark tea for my headache. You've told me many lies, Jesper. Victoria pulled a folded document from her sleeve. But this is the truth. A contract you'll honor, or I'll have you arrested for theft. Jesper's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. The words swam before her eyes: mail order bride agreement. Daniel Reed. Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory. Passage paid in exchange for marriage and domestic duties. Asterisk. I never signed this. Your signature is right there. Victoria pointed to the bottom of the page. The handwriting did look remarkably like Jesper's own careful script. You agreed to marry Mr. Reed to settle the debts you accumulated living off my brother's estate. The train leaves at dawn. Your ticket is already purchased. You forged my signature. But even as Jesper said it, she knew the truth didn't matter. Victoria owned the house. Victoria controlled what remained of Robert's modest inheritance. Victoria had connections with the police, the courts, the social pillars who could make a woman disappear into an asylum with a word. Can you prove it? Victoria smiled. It was not a kind expression. Or will you honor this contract like a decent woman and leave Philadelphia quietly? Jesper looked down at the paper. Wyoming Territory, a place so far from civilization it might as well be the moon. A man named Daniel Reed who wanted a wife sight unseen. A new life that felt like a death sentence. But what choice did she have? The train leaves at 5, Victoria continued. I've had your things packed. 1 trunk. That's all you're entitled to. She paused, her expression softening just enough to be cruel. You should thank me, Jesper. Out west, no one will know what you did. You can start fresh. Pretend you're someone worth loving. Then Victoria turned and walked back into the warm house, leaving Jesper kneeling in the snow. For a long moment, Jesper didn't move. The cold had seeped through her thin dress, numbing her legs. She thought about staying there, letting the winter take her the way the fire had taken Rose. But then her fingers brushed against something in her coat pocket. A small wooden box no bigger than her palm. She carried it every day for 3 years, hidden away like a secret heartbeat. Inside was a blue hair ribbon, Rose's favorite, the one she'd worn the day of the fire. Jesper had found it in the garden the morning after, impossibly clean and untouched by smoke, as if Rose had placed it there carefully before. But that was impossible. The fire marshal said Rose had been trapped in her bedroom. There was no way she could have made it to the garden. Unless, Jesper's heart began to beat faster. Unless Rose hadn't been in the bedroom at all. The thought had haunted her for 3 years. The body they'd buried had been too badly burned to identify. The fire had started near Rose's room, yes, but Jesper had never seen her daughter's face in the coffin. The funeral had been closed casket, Victoria had insisted. What if? No. Jesper forced herself to breathe. This was the laudanum talking. The grief. The desperate hope of a mother who couldn't accept her child's death. Rose was gone, and Jesper had nothing left but a train ticket to nowhere and a stranger who wanted a wife. She pushed herself to her feet, her legs aching from the cold. A carriage waited at the corner, Victoria's efficiency extending even to her exile. The driver looked away as Jesper approached, as if being seen helping a disgraced woman might somehow taint him. One trunk, 3 years of marriage reduced to one trunk of clothing and memories. Jesper climbed into the carriage and didn't look back at the brownstone. Didn't let herself think about Rose's room or the garden or the ribbon in her pocket. She had a train to catch, and a future that felt like falling into darkness. Adahan. The train lurched westward through the January darkness, carrying Jesper away from everything she'd ever known. She'd managed to secure a seat by the window in the third-class car, wedged between a farmer who smelled of tobacco and a young mother with 2 squalling infants. The air was thick with coal smoke and unwashed bodies and the peculiar desperation of people running toward new lives or away from old ones. Jesper kept her face turned to the window, watching Pennsylvania blur into Ohio, Ohio into Indiana. The landscape grew flatter, emptier, civilization peeling away like dead skin. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire. The blaze had started just after midnight. Jesper remembered waking to the smell of smoke, stumbling into the hallway to find the second floor engulfed in flames. She'd screamed for Rose, tried to reach her daughter's bedroom, but the heat had driven her back. Robert had pulled her outside. The last thing she remembered before the laudanum administered by the doctor afterward, not before, no matter what Victoria claimed, was watching Rose's window explode outward in a shower of glass and embers. They told her later that Rose's body had been found in the bed, overcome by smoke before the flames reached her. A mercy, they'd said. But Jesper had never seen the body, and she'd never understood why Rose's ribbon had been in the garden. First time heading west. The voice startled Jesper from her thoughts. The young mother beside her had finally gotten both infants to sleep and was looking at Jesper with the weary camaraderie of fellow travelers. Yes, Jesper said quietly, at you. Third time. The woman laughed, but it was hollow. Tried California first. Husband died of cholera. Tried Oregon second. Different husband, same result. Now I'm bound for Wyoming with husband number 3. She patted one of the sleeping babies. Though these aren't his, he thinks they are. Men don't ask too many questions when you're cheap enough. Jesper didn't know how to respond to that brutal honesty. Mail order bride, the woman continued, nodding at the contract Jesper still clutched. Something like that. Word of advice, don't expect much. The men who send for wives from back east usually do it because no woman in her right mind would marry them if she had a choice. The woman shifted one of the babies to her other arm. What's he do, your intended? I don't know. Jesper realized she'd never asked. The contract listed only Daniel Reed's name and the town's Silver Creek, Wyoming territory. The letter mentioned a ranch. Could be worse. At least ranchers have land. I'm marrying a miner. We'll probably both die in a cave-in within the year. The woman said it cheerfully, as if death were just another inconvenience on the schedule. What's your name? Jesper Thompson. Margaret Harris. Pleased to meet you, Jesper. Try to get some sleep. Wyoming's still 3 days off. But Jesper couldn't sleep. She spent the next 3 days watching America scroll past her window like a picture book of emptiness. The cities gave way to towns, the towns to settlements, the settlements to nothing but grass and sky and the occasional smudge of buffalo in the distance. At night, she dreamed of Rose. Not burning, never burning. Instead, she dreamed of her daughter, standing in a dark room calling for her mother. But no matter how fast Jesper ran, she could never reach her. The room kept stretching longer, and Rose's voice grew fainter until Jesper would wake with tears on her face and the other passengers looking away politely. On the fourth day, the train began to climb. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks white with snow that never melted even in summer. The air grew thinner, colder. Margaret Harris had gotten off at a mining camp in Colorado with her babies and her third husband, leaving Jesper alone with her thoughts. There were only a dozen passengers left by the time the conductor called out Silver Creek, Wyoming territory in a voice that suggested the town was barely worth stopping for. Jesper gathered her small carpet bag and stepped onto the platform. The wind hit her like a fist. She'd thought Philadelphia winters were cold, but this was something else entirely. This was a cold that went bone deep, that turned breath to ice crystals in the air. The sky was the color of old pewter, heavy with the promise of snow. Silver Creek was barely a town. One main street unpaved and frozen into ruts that would turn to mud come spring. A general store, a saloon with a crooked sign, a church that looked like it was held together more by prayer than by nails. A few scattered houses huddled against the wind like frightened animals. And at the end of the platform stood a man in a dark coat. The sheriff, Jesper realized. She could see the tin star pinned to his chest. She approached, cautiously, carpetbag in hand. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Daniel Reed. I'm his—" The word bride stuck in her throat. "I'm expected." The sheriff was perhaps 50, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He looked at Jesper with something like pity. "You're Jesper Thompson." "Yes. I'm Sheriff Tom Hayes." He cleared his throat. "I'm afraid I have bad news, Miss Thompson. Daniel Reed died 2 weeks ago. Mining accident up at the Dalton Silver Mine. Tunnel collapsed on him and 3 other men." The world tilted sideways. Dead. Her husband-to-be was dead. But Jesper's mind raced. "I received a letter from him just 3 weeks ago. He knew I was coming. He sent the ticket. Letter probably crossed paths with his death in the mail. I'm sorry, Miss Thompson. Truly sorry." Sheriff Hayes looked past her at the train, which was already preparing to depart. "Did you want to buy a return ticket? I can help you." "I can't." The words came out flat, final. "I can't go back." There was nothing to go back to. No home, no money, no one waiting except Victoria and her accusations, and the cold Philadelphia streets that had never wanted her anyway. "Then I'm afraid you've got a problem." The sheriff's voice was gentle but firm. "Silver Creek doesn't have much use for unmarried women with no means of support. We're a mining town, rough men, hard living. Not safe for a woman alone. I can work." Desperation crept into Jesper's voice. "I can cook, clean, teach. I was a school teacher before I married." "We don't have a school, Miss Thompson, and the boarding house won't take a woman who can't pay." He hesitated. "There is one place that might take you, but I wouldn't recommend." "The saloon." "Yes, ma'am." Jesper looked down the muddy street at the building in question. Even from here, she could hear rough laughter and the tinny sound of an out-of-tune piano. She knew exactly what kind of work they'd offer her. "Is there nothing else?" Her voice was barely a whisper now. "I'm sorry, Miss Thompson. If you wait until the evening train, I'll wire ahead to Denver. Maybe you can find—" "Excuse me, Sheriff." The voice came from behind them, deep quiet with an edge like winter steel. Jesper turned. A man stood at the edge of the platform. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in work clothes and a heavy coat that had seen better years. His face was weathered by sun and wind, his dark hair touched with gray at the temples. He couldn't have been more than 45, but he had the eyes of someone much older. Someone who'd seen things that carved lines into a soul. "Mr. Brennan," the sheriff's tone changed, became warier. "Didn't expect to see you in town. Had business at the assayer's office." The man's eyes flicked to Jesper, then away. "Heard you mention this woman needs work. She was meant to marry Daniel Reed. Didn't know he'd passed." "I see." A long pause, then "She'll work for me." The sheriff's eyebrows shot up. "Cole, you haven't taken on anyone new since—" "I need a bookkeeper." The man Cole Brennan cut him off. "Someone who can read and write, keep accounts." His gaze settled on Jesper fully now. "Can you do that?" Jesper's heart was beating too fast. There was something about this man that felt dangerous. Not in the way of violence, but in the way of deep water. You couldn't see the bottom, couldn't tell how far down the darkness went. But what choice did she have? Yes, she said, I can keep books. Good, my ranch is 15 miles north. You'll have a room in the main house. Meals provided, $20 a month in wages. He said it matter-of-factly as if he hired strange women off train platforms every day. The work is legitimate. You'll not be asked to do anything improper. Sheriff Hayes was staring at Cole Brennan like he'd grown a second head. Cole, are you certain? She needs work. I need a bookkeeper. Seems straightforward enough. Brennan's tone brooked no argument. He turned back to Jesper. Unless you'd rather try your luck elsewhere. Jesper thought of the saloon, thought of Victoria's brownstone, thought of having absolutely nowhere else in the world to go. I accept, she said. For the first time, something that might have been approval flickered in Cole Brennan's eyes. Get your trunk, Miss Thompson. We leave in 10 minutes. As Jesper hurried back to collect her one piece of luggage from the station, she heard Sheriff Hayes hiss at Brennan. What in God's name are you thinking? You haven't let anyone set foot on that ranch in 6 years, not since... That's my business, Tom. People will talk. People always talk. Jesper pretended not to hear as she dragged her trunk back to the platform. Cole Brennan took it from her without asking, lifting it as if it weighed nothing. He carried it to a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses that looked as weathered and practical as everything else in this territory. He loaded the trunk, then offered Jesper his hand to help her onto the seat. His grip was calloused, strong, and cold through his glove. Thank you, Jesper murmured. For this. Cole Brennan didn't respond. He just climbed onto the seat beside her, took up the reins, and urged the horses forward. As they left Silver Creek behind, Jesper glanced back once. Sheriff Hayes stood on the platform watching them go with an expression she couldn't quite read. It looked almost like worry, or perhaps pity. The wagon rolled north into country that grew wilder with every mile. The mountains loomed closer, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Snow began to fall, just a few flakes at first, then more until the world turned white and silent. Cole Brennan didn't speak. Jesper tried once. How far is your ranch? 15 miles. That was all. No conversation, no questions about where she'd come from or why she'd agreed to marry a stranger. Just the creak of the wagon wheels and the soft huff of the horse's breath in the cold air. After an hour, they passed through a gate bearing a brand burned into a wooden sign, CB Ranch. The land beyond was vast rolling hills, thick with winter grass, split-rail fences stretching into the distance, and in a valley below a collection of buildings that looked more like a small settlement than a ranch. A large house, 2 stories built of logs and stone. Several barns, outbuildings. Corrals where horses stood huddled against the wind. It was impressive. This is yours, Jesper couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. All of it. Cole guided the wagon down toward the main house. 30,000 acres, 500 head of cattle, 50 horses. He said it without pride or boast, just fact. The books haven't been kept properly in years. That's where you come in. You said you needed someone who could read and write. Surely you... I can read fine. Writing is harder for me. Numbers more so. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. But mostly I don't have time. Ranch needs running. He climbed down and began unloading her trunk. Jesper followed her feet, sinking into snow that was already several inches deep. The front door opened. A woman appeared older, perhaps 60, with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a face that spoke of prairie winters and few smiles. She looked at Jesper with open suspicion. Who's this, Cole? New bookkeeper. Mrs. Thompson, this is Agnes Murphy. She cooks and keeps the house. He carried the trunk past Agnes without waiting for permission. She'll have the east bedroom upstairs. The east. Agnes's eyes widened. Cole, that's the only room that's ready. His voice was flat, final. Agnes pressed her lips together but said nothing more. She stepped aside to let Jesper enter. The house was warm, at least. A fire burned in the great stone fireplace that dominated the main room. The furniture was simple but well-made chairs that looked hand-carved, a table that could seat a dozen. Everything was scrupulously clean, but somehow empty, like a stage set waiting for actors who would never arrive. I'll show you the office tomorrow, Cole said, already heading for the stairs with her trunk. Tonight you'll rest. Supper is at 6. Agnes will show you where things are. He disappeared up the stairs. Agnes and Jesper stood in awkward silence. You don't look like a bookkeeper, Agnes finally said. I was a teacher before I married. Jesper tried to sound confident. I can manage accounts. Agnes moved toward the kitchen. Well, don't go getting ideas about Mr. Brennan. He's not looking for a wife. Had one already. She died along with their boy 6 years back. Been alone ever since. Likes it that way. I wasn't. Jesper felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm only here to work. Good. Keep it that way. Agnes pulled a pot from the stove. Supper is stew. You'll eat in the kitchen with me. Mr. Brennan takes his meals alone in his study. I see. But Jesper didn't see it all. This ranch, this silent man, this locked-away grief, it all felt like walking into someone else's nightmare. Agnes showed her upstairs to the east bedroom. It was larger than Jesper had expected, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the snowy valley. There was even a small stove in the corner for warmth. Dinner in an hour, Agnes said curtly and left. Alone, Jesper sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the weight of the day. She was in Wyoming territory, in the home of a stranger, working for a man who barely spoke and whose own housekeeper looked at him like he was a locked door no one dared open. She should have been terrified, but instead she felt nothing, numbness. The same numbness that had carried her through Rose's funeral, through Robert's death, through 3 years of Victoria's cruelty. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden box. Opened it. Rose's blue ribbon lay coiled inside like a sleeping snake. I don't know if you're out there somewhere, Jesper whispered to the empty room. I don't know if I'm going mad thinking you might be. But I promise you, Rose, if there's any chance at all that you're alive, I'll find you. The ribbon didn't answer, but Jesper hadn't expected it to. She tucked the box away, unpacked her few belongings, and went downstairs for supper with a woman who clearly didn't want her there. Tomorrow she'd start her work. Tomorrow she'd begin figuring out what secrets Cole Brennan was hiding. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find a reason to keep living. Jesper woke to darkness and the sound of crying. For a moment, she was back in Philadelphia, hearing Rose call for her from the burning bedroom. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she sat bolt upright, disoriented, reaching for a daughter who wasn't there. Then memory returned. Wyoming, the ranch, Cole Brennan's silent house. The crying continued. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. A child's voice. Jesper's hands shook as she lit the lamp on her bedside table. The clock on the mantel read 3 in the morning. The house was silent except for that distant, heartbreaking sound. She pulled on her robe and opened her door as quietly as she could. The hallway was dark, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the window at the far end. There were 4 doors besides her own. 3 stood ajar, showing empty rooms. The 4th, directly across from hers, was shut tight. The crying was coming from behind it. Jesper crossed the hall, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She pressed her ear to the door. Yes, definitely a child crying. But the voice was strange, distant, as if it came from very far away. Or perhaps from years ago, trapped in the wooden walls like a memory that wouldn't fade. She tried the doorknob. Locked. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Jesper spun around, her heart in her throat. Cole Brennan stood at the end of the hallway, still fully dressed despite the hour. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, not angry exactly, but haunted. Hollow. I heard, Jesper's voice cracked. I heard a child crying. You heard nothing. But his eyes said otherwise. Go back to bed, Mrs. Thompson. There's someone in there, a child who needs... There's no one in that room. He said it with such finality that it felt like a door slamming shut. It's been locked for 6 years. Will stay locked. You're not to try opening it again. Understood. Jesper wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers. But the look on his face stopped her. It was the look of a man standing at the edge of a cliff, 1 step away from falling. Understood, she whispered. Cole nodded once, then turned and walked back down the hall. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door open and close. Leaving the house at 3 in the morning. To go where? Jesper pressed her ear to the locked door one more time. Silence now. Whatever she'd heard, ghost or memory or wishful thinking, was gone. She went back to her room but didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window and watched the sky lighten from black to gray to pale blue. Watched Cole Brennan ride out across the snowy fields on a dark horse heading north toward the mountains. By the time Agnes knocked on her door at 7, Jesper had already dressed and pinned her hair up. She was determined not to show weakness, not to ask questions that wouldn't be answered. Breakfast is in the kitchen, Agnes said. Then Mr. Brennan wants you in the office. The office turned out to be a small room off the main parlor, lined with shelves holding ledgers and account books, and what looked like years of neglected paperwork. A desk sat beneath the window covered in dust. Cole was already there, standing with his back to her, looking out at the ranch. Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. Good morning, Mr. Brennan. He turned to face her. In daylight, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the gray in his dark hair. He couldn't have slept more than an hour or 2. These are the ranch accounts for the past 6 years. He gestured to the shelves. They're a mess. I need them organized, reconciled, and brought current. Can you do that? Jesper pulled down one of the ledgers and opened it. The handwriting was feminine, neat, careful. But it stopped abruptly halfway through 1872. The pages after were blank except for a few scratched notes in Cole's rough hand dates numbers that meant nothing without context. Who kept the books before? Jesper asked. My wife. Cole's voice was carefully neutral. Elizabeth. I'm sorry for your loss. He didn't acknowledge the condolence. You'll find discrepancies, money missing from accounts. I need to know where it went. Missing. Jesper looked up. You think someone's been stealing from you? I know someone has, I just don't know who. He moved toward the door. You'll work here mornings. Afternoons you can help Agnes with whatever she needs. Evenings are your own. Mr. Brennan. Jesper hesitated. About last night, the crying I heard. You heard wind in the eaves. His tone brooked no argument. Nothing more. He left before she could respond. Jesper stood alone in the office, surrounded by 6 years of secrets, written in neat feminine script that ended with death. She sat down at the desk and began to read. The first thing Jesper discovered was that Cole Brennan was far wealthier than his simple clothing and rough manner suggested. The CB ranch wasn't just profitable, it was a small empire. Cattle sales, horse breeding, contracts with the army for remounts, even some mining interest. The accounts from Elizabeth Brennan's time showed meticulous records of every dollar earned and spent. But after her death, the books fell apart. Cole had tried to maintain them. Jesper could see his labored handwriting, struggling with numbers and dates. But large sums of money had started disappearing. Not all at once, just trickling away. $50 here, $100 there, sometimes more. By Jesper's calculation, nearly $8,000 had vanished over the past 6 years. Either Cole Brennan was spending money on something he didn't want recorded, or someone was systematically robbing him. She worked through lunch, barely noticing when Agnes brought her a sandwich and coffee. The puzzle of the missing money consumed her. It was easier to focus on numbers than to think about locked rooms and phantom children crying in the night. By late afternoon, she'd found a pattern. The missing money always corresponded with trips Cole had made to various towns: Denver, Cheyenne, Salt Lake City. The amounts grew larger the farther he traveled. What was he buying? Mrs. Thompson. Jesper looked up to find Cole standing in the doorway. The sun was setting behind him, turning him into a silhouette. I need your help with something. She followed him outside where 2 ranch hands were struggling with a cow that had somehow gotten herself tangled in barbed wire. The animal was panicking, thrashing, making the situation worse. Can you calm her? Cole asked. Talk to her while we cut her free. Jesper had grown up in Philadelphia. She knew nothing about cows, but she knew about fear. She approached slowly, speaking in the same soft voice she'd once used to calm Rose during thunderstorms. Easy, girl, easy now. We're here to help. Just hold still. The cow's rolling eyes fixed on her. Jesper kept talking, kept her voice steady and gentle, while Cole and his men carefully cut away the wire. The animal trembled, but stopped thrashing. Good, Cole murmured. Keep going. Jesper kept talking until they'd freed the last strand of wire, and the cow stumbled away bleeding, but alive. Cole looked at her with something like respect. You're good with frightened things. It wasn't a question. I had a daughter, Jesper said quietly. She was afraid of storms. Cole's expression shifted, became careful, guarded. She died 3 years ago, in a fire. The words came out flat, automatic. She'd said them so many times they'd lost all meaning. She was 5. For a long moment, Cole said nothing. Then, I'm sorry. So am I. They stood in the fading light, 2 people united by grief they didn't know how to carry. My son was 7 when he died, Cole said finally. Each word sounded like it cost him something. Michael, 6 years ago this spring. How did... Jesper stopped herself. I'm sorry, that's not my place to ask. Fever. Cole's jaw tightened. Or that's what they told me. He and Elizabeth both. I was away buying cattle in Denver. Came home to find them both dead and buried. He looked away. Sometimes I think that's why God took them. Punishment for me not being there. Jesper's throat tightened. God doesn't punish children for their parents' sins. Doesn't he? Cole's voice was bitter. You can't tell me you haven't wondered what you did wrong, why your daughter was taken. She had. Oh God, she had. Every day, Jesper whispered. They stood together in the gathering darkness. Both of them weighted down by children who would never grow old. Finally, Cole spoke again. Supper will be ready soon. You should go in. Mr. Brennan, Jesper took a breath. I found discrepancies in the accounts. Money missing. Nearly $8,000 over 6 years. His face went carefully blank. I see. If someone's stealing from you, they're not. He said it too quickly. That money, it's accounted for. I just didn't write it down properly. But the amounts correspond with your trips to Mrs. Thompson. His voice turned cold. The books are for the ranch accounts. What I do with my personal money is my own business. Are we clear? Jesper felt heat rise to her cheeks. Of course. Forgive me. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. The work you did today was good. Thank you. It was the first time he'd thanked her for anything. Jesper nodded and walked back to the house, her mind racing. Cole Brennan was lying about the money. She was certain of it. The question was why. That night, she didn't hear crying. Instead, she heard hoofbeats. Jesper went to her window and looked out to see Cole riding away from the ranch again, this time carrying saddlebags that looked heavy. Where did he go on these midnight rides? She thought about the $8,000. Thought about his defensive reaction when she'd mentioned it. Thought about the locked room and the crying that might have been wind, but didn't sound like wind at all. Cole Brennan was a man with secrets, and Jesper had lived with Victoria long enough to know that secrets were dangerous things. But she'd also learned that sometimes the only way to survive was to uncover the truth, even if it destroyed you in the process. 3 weeks passed before Jesper saw the girl. She'd fallen into a routine at the CB Ranch, mornings in the office, wrestling with ledgers, afternoons helping Agnes with mending, and cooking, evenings alone in her room, reading the battered copies of Shakespeare she'd found on a shelf. Cole remained distant, but civil, speaking to her only about ranch business. The crying never returned, or if it did, Jesper slept through it. She'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing when she found the child hiding in the barn. It was late afternoon and Jesper had gone to collect eggs from the hen house when she heard a sound, a soft scraping like a mouse in the walls. She followed it to an empty stall and found a girl crouched in the corner, thin as a whisper and just as easily overlooked. The child couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. She had straight black hair that hung past her shoulders and skin the color of tea with cream. Her dark eyes were huge in her gaunt face, watching Jesper with the wariness of a wild animal. Hello, Jesper said softly, crouching down to make herself smaller, less threatening. I'm Jesper. What's your name? The girl didn't answer. She pressed herself tighter into the corner, trembling. It's all right, I won't hurt you. Jesper spoke in the same gentle voice she'd used with the injured cow. Are you hungry? A tiny nod. Wait here, I'll bring you something. Jesper hurried back to the kitchen where Agnes was preparing supper. We need extra bread and some of that stew from lunch. Agnes looked up sharply. What for? There's a child in the barn, a girl. She's terrified and half-starved. For a moment, Agnes's stern expression cracked, showing something like resignation. You found Em. Em. That's what Cole calls her. Short for Emily, though. I don't know if that's her real name. Agnes wrapped bread and stew in a cloth. She showed up about 4 months ago. Won't talk. Won't say where she came from. Cole lets her stay in the barn. She's living in the barn, Jesper's voice rose. In winter, she won't come inside. Agnes thrust the bundle at Jesper. Tried to bring her in a dozen times. She runs. Cole figured she'd come in when she was ready. Jesper took the food and returned to the barn. The girl was still there, watching the doorway, as if calculating whether she could bolt past Jesper to freedom. I brought you supper. Jesper set the bundle down and backed away. You don't have to talk to me, but you should eat. The girl stared at the food for a long moment, then moving with the quick, jerky motions of someone used to snatching what she could before it was taken away, she grabbed the bread and tore into it. Jesper's heart broke watching her eat. This child was more than just hungry, she was hollow. Used up, running on nothing but survival instinct. Em, Jesper said quietly. Is that your name? The girl's eyes flicked to her briefly, then away. Not a yes, but not a no either. Where did you come from, Em? The girl shook her head violently and backed deeper into the corner. All right. Jesper held up her hands. You don't have to tell me, but if you need anything, food, blankets, anything at all, you come find me. My room is the one with the blue curtains, 2nd floor, east side. Em watched her with those huge dark eyes but said nothing. Jesper left her to eat in peace. That night at supper, she confronted Cole. Why is that child living in the barn? Cole looked up from his plate. They were eating in the kitchen. Jesper had refused to take her meals separately after the first week, insisting it was ridiculous for Agnes to serve 2 different sittings. Em won't come inside. She's a child. You can't just leave her. I didn't leave her anywhere. She came here on her own. Cole's voice was patient but firm. Found her stealing eggs from the hen house in September. She was half dead from exposure. Fed her, offered her a bed. She ran, came back the next day for more food. Same pattern for weeks. Eventually, she started staying in the barn. Did you contact the authorities? Try to find her family. Sheriff Hayes knows she's here. There's no family looking for her, we checked. And if I forced her into town, she'd just run again. Probably into the mountains where she'd die. He met Jesper's eyes. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a frightened creature is let it come to you in its own time. Jesper thought of the locked room upstairs, of the crying she'd heard that first night. Is that what you're doing? Waiting for something to come to you? Cole's expression shuddered. Eat your supper, Mrs. Thompson. But Jesper couldn't let it go. You're spending $8,000 on something you won't explain. You leave the ranch at midnight and return at dawn. You keep a room locked that belonged to your son, and now there's a traumatized child living in your barn, and you won't tell me why, because it's not your business. Cole's voice was quiet but edged with steel. You work for me. That doesn't give you the right to question how I live my life. Agnes was watching them both, her expression unreadable. Jesper stood abruptly. You're right. Forgive me. She left the kitchen and went upstairs, anger and frustration burning in her chest. But later that night, when she couldn't sleep, she found herself thinking about what Cole had said. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a frightened creature is let it come to you in its own time. Was that what he was doing with the locked room? With his midnight rides and his careful distance from everyone? Was he waiting for something or someone to come back to him? The next morning, Jesper found Em waiting outside her door. The girl stood in the hallway like a ghost, so still and silent that Jesper nearly walked past her. But then Em's hand shot out, pressing a folded piece of paper into Jesper's palm before darting back down the stairs. Jesper unfolded the paper. It was a drawing, crude but clear. A building with bars on the windows, children's faces pressed against the glass. And below, in shaky letters, help them. Jesper's blood turned to ice. She ran downstairs, but Em had already vanished. She found Cole in the barn, saddling his horse. Em gave me this. Jesper thrust the paper at him. Cole looked at it for a long moment. Something in his face changed, became harder, older. Where is she? I don't know. She ran. Jesper grabbed his arm. What is this? What does it mean? Cole carefully folded the paper and tucked it into his coat pocket. Come with me. He led her back to the house, to his study, a room Jesper had never been invited into. It was sparse, utilitarian, with a desk and a locked cabinet and nothing else. Cole unlocked the cabinet and pulled out a second ledger. You wanted to know where the money went, he said quietly. This is where. He opened the ledger. Jesper read the entries, her hands beginning to shake. November 1872. Denver. Information on missing children. $50. January 1873. Cheyenne. Private investigator. $200. March 1873. Salt Lake City. Witness testimony. $75. May 1873. Denver. Failed lead. $150. The list went on, page after poem, of payments to investigators, informants, witnesses, all searching for the same thing. Missing children. Your son, Jesper whispered. Michael, he's not dead. I don't know. Cole's voice was raw. Elizabeth died of fever, that much is true, but Michael... He stared at the ledger. His body was never found. They told me he'd been buried with his mother, but when I asked to see the grave, the undertaker got nervous. Started changing his story. You think he was taken? I think someone wants me to believe he's dead. Cole's hands clenched into fists. I've been searching for 6 years, following every rumor, every whisper of children disappearing near mining towns. And every trail leads nowhere. Jesper thought of this drawing, the barred windows, Em's desperate plea. Until now, she said. Cole nodded. Em knows something. She's seen something, but she's too frightened to tell me. She's not frightened of you. Jesper met his eyes. She's frightened of whoever had her before. They stood in silence, the weight of 6 years of searching pressing down on them both. Finally, Jesper spoke. The crying I heard that first night in the locked room. Michael's room. Cole's voice was barely audible. I keep it exactly as it was. Sometimes I think, if I just wait long enough, if I keep everything ready, he'll come home. Oh, Cole. The name slipped out before Jesper could stop it. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and she saw the depth of his pain. It matched her own. You understand, he said. Not a question. Yes. Jesper's throat tightened. My daughter Rose. They told me she burned in the fire, but I never saw her body either. And I found her ribbon in the garden somewhere. She couldn't have put it if she'd been trapped in her room. She pulled the small wooden box from her pocket and opened it, showing him the blue ribbon. For 3 years, I've told myself I was mad to hope, but what if I'm not? Cole reached out and touched the ribbon gently as if it were made of spider silk. What if they're both out there somewhere, Jesper whispered. What if we were both told lies? Then we find the truth. Cole's voice hardened with purpose. Together. Over the next week, Jesper and Cole worked in careful partnership, trying to coax information from Em without pushing her away. It was Jesper who finally succeeded. She started bringing books to the barn, simple ones with pictures. She'd sit in the stall next to Em's hiding place and read aloud, never expecting a response. Just offering stories, company, proof that someone cared. On the 5th day, Em crept closer. On the 7th, she sat beside Jesper and looked at the pictures. On the 10th, she whispered her first words, "Can you teach me to read?" "Of course," Jesper said, her heart soaring. "Would you like to start now?" Em nodded. They started with simple words. Cat, dog, house. Em was a quick learner, hungry for knowledge the way she'd been hungry for food. After an hour, when Jesper judged the moment right, she asked gently, "Em, the drawing you gave me, can you tell me about it?" Em's whole body went rigid. "You're safe here," Jesper said. "No one will hurt you, but if there are other children who need help." Em's hands twisted in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet Jesper had to lean in to hear. "The dark place, under the ground. They keep children there." Where is this place? The silver mine? The big one with the tall buildings? Em's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Dalton's mine. Frank Dalton." Jesper knew the name. He owned the largest silver operation in the territory. She'd seen his name in the ranch ledgers. Cole sold him horses occasionally. "What happens in this dark place?" Em shook her head, trembling. "Bad things. They sell us. To people who take us away, across the border. I heard them talking." Jesper's stomach turned over. "How did you escape?" "Tunnel collapsed. Everyone ran. I ran too." Em wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I've been hiding ever since. Afraid they'd find me, take me back." "Did you see other children there?" "A boy, maybe 7 years old when you last saw him. Dark hair about this tall." Jesper held her hand up to indicate Michael's height 6 years ago. Em frowned, thinking. "There was an older boy. Takes care of the little ones. Protects them. The bad men don't like him." Cole appeared in the barn doorway so suddenly that Em scrambled back into the corner. But he knelt slowly, making himself small, his voice infinitely gentle. "Em, this boy, what does he look like?" Em peeked out from her hiding place. "Brown hair. Tall now. He has a scar here." She touched her left eyebrow, from when he fought back. Cole's face had gone white. "Michael had a scar like that, fell from a tree when he was 5. "What's his name?" Jesper asked. "Did anyone say his name?" "They call him Sawyer, but sometimes when he thinks no one's listening, he talks to himself. Tells himself stories about his papa, about a ranch with horses." Em looked at Cole with sudden recognition. "This ranch. He talks about this ranch." Cole made a sound like he'd been punched. Jesper reached for his hand without thinking. He gripped it hard enough to hurt. "He's alive," Cole whispered. "My son is alive." "How many children are there?" Jesper asked Em, her mind already racing ahead to what they'd need to do. 20, maybe more. They bring new ones every month." "And you're certain they're at Dalton's mine?" Em nodded. "Under this main shaft. Secret tunnels. I can show you where." Cole stood abruptly, his face set with grim determination. "Then we're going to get them out. All of them." "We need help," Jesper said. "The sheriff can't be trusted." Cole's voice was flat. "Dalton owns half the town. If we go to Hayes, word will get back to Dalton within the hour." "Then who?" Cole looked at her. "You, me, and anyone else we can find who isn't on Dalton's payroll." It was insane, impossible. But Jesper thought of Rose's ribbon. Thought of 20 children trapped in darkness. Thought of Michael telling himself stories about his father's ranch to survive. "When do we start?" she asked. The plan took shape over the next 3 days. Cole quietly reached out to the few men he trusted, ranch hands who'd worked for him for years. A former Army sergeant who'd retired to Silver Creek, a prospector who'd lost his daughter to the same mysterious disappearances. They met at night in the CB Ranch barn, speaking in whispers, while Em drew maps in the dirt with a stick. "The main entrance is here," she explained, pointing. "But there's a service tunnel that comes out near the creek. That's how I escaped." "How many guards?" the former sergeant asked. "2 at the main entrance. Maybe more inside. They don't think anyone knows about the children." "They're about to learn different," Cole said grimly. Jesper studied the map, her teacher's mind working through logistics. "We can't just raid the place. We need to get the children out safely first, which means we need a distraction. I can create a distraction, the prospector said. His name was Dutch, and he had the look of a man with nothing left to lose. Small explosion in one of the side tunnels. Make them think there's a cave-in. Everyone will rush to that section. While we go in through the service tunnel and get the children out, Cole finished. What about after? Agnes spoke up from the shadows. She'd insisted on being part of the planning, saying someone needed to prepare to receive 24 traumatized children. Dalton will know they're missing. He'll come looking. Let him come, Cole said coldly. By then we'll have the children safe and testimony from all of them about what happened. Even Dalton can't buy his way out of that much evidence. But Jesper saw the flaw. Unless he runs, takes his money and disappears before anyone can arrest him, then we make sure he doesn't have the chance to run. Cole looked around at the assembled group. We move tomorrow night. Everyone agreed. One by one they nodded. Em tugged on Jesper's sleeve. I want to help. You've already helped more than you know, Jesper said gently. No. Em's small face was fierce. I have to go back. I have to show them, the little ones, that someone came, that we don't forget them. Jesper looked at Cole, who seemed to be waging an internal war. Finally, he nodded. You stay with Jesper. Don't leave her side. Understood. Em nodded solemnly. They finalized the details. Dutch would set his charges at midnight. At the sound of the explosion, Cole's team would move in through the service tunnel. Jesper and Em would wait with the wagons to transport the children back to the ranch. It was a good plan. It should have worked. But none of them knew that Frank Dalton had informants everywhere, including among Cole's own ranch hands. The explosion lit up the night sky at precisely midnight. Jesper sat in the wagon with Em, watching orange flames bloom against the darkness. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Cole had been gone for 20 minutes, descending into those tunnels with his small team. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. They'll be all right, Em whispered, though Jesper wasn't sure if the girl was trying to convince her or herself. Then they heard it, children's voices, crying and calling out. Jesper's breath caught as figures began to emerge from the tree line near the creek. Cole came first, carrying a small child who couldn't have been more than 5. Behind him came the others, children of all ages, filthy and frightened but alive. So beautifully, impossibly alive. Jesper jumped down from the wagon and began helping them climb aboard. There were so many, 23 just as Em had said. Some were crying, some were silent with shock. All of them looked half-starved and terrified. And then she saw him. A boy, perhaps 13 now, with dark hair and his father's eyes and a scar through his left eyebrow. He was helping the younger children, lifting them into the wagon with careful hands. Michael, Cole breathed. The boy's head snapped up. For a moment, he just stared. Then, Papa, the word broke something in Cole. He crossed the distance between them and pulled his son into his arms, and Michael clung to him like he was drowning, and Cole was the only solid thing in the world. I've got you, Cole whispered. I've got you. You're safe now. Jesper had to look away, tears streaming down her face. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. But then she heard the horses. A dozen riders burst from the tree line, led by a man in an expensive coat, who could only be Frank Dalton. Behind him rode Sheriff Hayes and several armed men. Well, well, Dalton said, his voice smooth as oil. Jacob Brennan, I should have known you were behind this theft. Theft. Cole's voice was deadly quiet. These are children, human beings, not property. These are contracted laborers who belong to my operation, Dalton corrected. And you've just committed a crime breaking them out. Sheriff Hayes, Jesper called out desperate. You can't let this stand. These children have been imprisoned, abused. Some of them, she thought of Em's words about selling them across the border. Some of them have been trafficked. But Hayes wouldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Dalton has legal contracts. Parents sold these children into service to pay debts. It's all documented. Documented. Cole's laugh was bitter. With forged papers, no doubt. My son wasn't sold, he was stolen. Your son died 6 years ago, Dalton said. You're clearly delusional with grief. Sheriff, arrest Mr. Brennan for kidnapping and theft. Now wait just a minute. Dutch stepped forward. One of Dalton's men raised his rifle. The shot cracked through the night air. Dutch fell, clutching his shoulder. Everything happened at once. Cole shoved Michael toward the wagon. The children screamed. Jesper grabbed Em and pulled her down behind the wagon wheel as more shots rang out. Get them out of here, Cole shouted to the sergeant. Take the back road to the ranch. What about you? I'll hold them off. Go. The sergeant didn't argue. He snapped the reins, and the horses bolted the wagon careening away into the darkness with its cargo of frightened children. Jesper found herself separated from the wagon and clutched in her arms, hiding behind a fallen log as bullets tore through the trees around them. She watched helplessly as Cole and his remaining men tried to fight back against impossible odds. Watched Dalton's hired guns close in. Watched the sheriff do nothing. Then she felt Em stiffen in her arms. "The lady," Em whispered. "The bad lady is here." Jesper looked up and her heart stopped. A woman stepped out of the shadows beside Frank Dalton's horse. A woman in a traveling dress, looking perfectly composed despite the chaos. Victoria Thompson. "Hello, Jesper," her sister-in-law called out. "Surprised to see me?" The world seemed to slow down. Victoria smiled, and it was the same cold smile she'd worn the day she'd sent Jesper away from Philadelphia. "You really should have stayed on the train, dear. Or better yet, taken my advice and thrown yourself off a bridge somewhere. Would have saved everyone a great deal of trouble." Jesper couldn't form words. "You're working with Dalton." "Working for him, actually. Have been for years." Victoria adjusted her gloves as casually as if they were discussing the weather. "How do you think I paid off my late husband's gambling debts?" Frank has very profitable business interests. He needed someone to help procure inventory from back east. The words hit Jesper like a physical blow. "Rose," she whispered. "You sold Rose." "I sold a debt-ridden 5-year-old who was more trouble than she was worth." Victoria's voice was matter-of-fact. "The fire was staged beautifully, don't you think? Everyone so sympathetic." No one questioned the closed coffin. Jesper lunged forward, but Em held her back with surprising strength. "Where is she?" Jesper's voice was raw with fury and anguish. "Where is my daughter?" "Sold and shipped to a lovely family in San Francisco 3 years ago. You'll never find her." Victoria turned to Dalton. "Kill them all. Make it look like a mining accident. Cave in. Very tragic." Dalton nodded to his men. But before anyone could move, a new voice rang out across the clearing. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Sheriff Hayes stood with his gun drawn, pointing at Frank Dalton. Everyone froze. "Tom," Dalton's voice was uncertain. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago." Hayes' hand was steady. "I've been investigating you, Frank. Quietly. Building a case. I knew about the children, knew you were trafficking them, but I needed proof that would hold up in court. Evidence that even your expensive lawyers couldn't explain away." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "I've got testimony from 3 of your former employees. I've got shipping manifests that show children being transported across the border. I've got bank records showing payoffs to officials." His eyes were hard. "And now I've got Victoria Thompson confirming it all out loud." Victoria's face went white. "You were recording this." A man stepped out from the trees, a court stenographer, his pencil still moving across the page. "Every word," Hayes confirmed. Dalton's hand moved toward his gun. Hayes fired. The shot hit the ground inches from Dalton's horse, making the animal rear. Dalton tumbled from the saddle, landing hard. His hired guns looked at each other uncertainly. They'd signed on to intimidate, not to fight the law. "Drop your weapons," Hayes ordered. "All of you. You're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy." One by one, the guns hit the ground. Victoria tried to run. Agnes Murphy stepped out of the shadows and clotheslined her with a tree branch. Victoria went down hard, and Agnes planted a boot on her back. "That's for every child you stole," Agnes said coldly. Jesper's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, Em still clutched in her arms, and began to sob. It was over. Finally, impossibly over. Cole appeared beside her, pulling her to her feet. There was blood on his sleeve, but his eyes were clear. "Michael," Jesper managed. "Safe, already halfway to the ranch." He looked down at her with an expression she'd never seen before, raw, vulnerable, grateful. "We did it." "Hayes did it," Jesper corrected. "Hayes finished it. But you started it." Cole's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "When you refused to ignore what was happening. When you demanded answers. When you made me believe it was possible to hope again." Jesper leaned into his touch, too exhausted and overwrought to question what it meant. Behind them, Sheriff Hayes was placing Dalton and Victoria in irons. The hired guns were being rounded up. The court stenographer was still writing furiously. "What about Rose?" Jesper whispered. Victoria said San Francisco, 3 years ago. "Then we'll go to San Francisco," Cole said simply. "We'll search every street if we have to, and we won't stop until we find her. That could take years." "Then it takes years." His voice was quiet but absolute. "You didn't give up on Michael. I won't give up on Rose." Something in Jesper's chest cracked open, a place she'd kept sealed tight since the fire. Hope, painful and bright, flooded in. Why, she asked. Why would you do that for me? Cole looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because in 6 years of searching, I never let myself believe I'd actually find him. I was just going through the motions, punishing myself for failing to protect him. He swallowed hard. But you walked into my life and you believed in possibilities, in second chances. You made me remember what it felt like to hope for something instead of just surviving the days. Cole, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know it's too soon. I know you're grieving your daughter and your husband and everything you've lost. But I need you to know when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to be more than your employer. Jesper's heart was beating too fast. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been alone in that house for 6 years, keeping everything frozen exactly as it was, because I was too afraid to live. Cole's hand was still on her face, infinitely gentle. I'm saying you thawed something in me I thought had died with Elizabeth. I'm saying that somewhere between the ledgers and the locked room and the midnight rides, I fell. A gunshot cracked through the air. Cole jerked his eyes going wide. Blood bloomed across his chest. Victoria stood 20 feet away, a derringer in her shaking hand, the tiny gun she'd pulled from her boot while no one was watching. If I can't have my freedom, she snarled, then you can't have your happy ending. Hayes's rifle barked. Victoria fell. But Jesper wasn't watching. She was catching Cole as he collapsed, pressing her hands against the wound in his chest, feeling his blood hot and wet against her palms. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Cole, stay with me. Please stay with me. His eyes were already glazing. Jesper, don't you dare, she said fiercely. Don't you dare die before telling me the rest of that sentence. What were you going to say? Cole smiled, and it was sad and sweet and full of things he'd never get to say. I fell in love with you, he whispered. Then his eyes closed, and Jesper started screaming. Cole Brennan survived the night. Barely. The doctor from Silver Creek worked for 3 hours to extract the bullet, which had lodged near his heart. Too close. If Victoria's hand had been steadier, if her aim had been a fraction truer, Cole would have died in Jesper's arms in that clearing. Instead, he lay unconscious in his own bed, his breathing shallow, his face the color of old parchment. Jesper refused to leave his side. She sat in a chair she'd dragged to his bedside, holding his hand, willing him to live through sheer force of desperate hope. Agnes brought her food she didn't eat, urged her to rest. But Jesper couldn't close her eyes without seeing Cole fall, couldn't stop feeling the hot pulse of his blood against her palms. I fell in love with you. The words repeated in her mind like a prayer or a curse. She hadn't said them back, hadn't had the chance. Please don't die, she whispered to his unconscious form. Please, I just found you. I can't lose you too. Outside the bedroom, the CB Ranch had transformed overnight into a refuge for traumatized children. 23 souls ages 5 to 14 filled the house with noise and tears and the slow, painful work of healing. Agnes had taken charge with surprising gentleness, organizing beds, preparing meals, finding clothes. The ranch hands who'd helped with the rescue took turns standing guard. None of them trusted that Dalton didn't have more men who might try something desperate. And in the midst of it all, Michael Brennan moved like a ghost. Jesper had tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Just kept himself busy helping the younger children, always working, never stopping. As if stopping meant having to feel things he wasn't ready to face. On the second day, Em finally coaxed him into Cole's room. Michael stood in the doorway, staring at his unconscious father, his face carefully blank. He searched for 6 years, Jesper said quietly. Never stopped. Never gave up on you. I know. Michael's voice was rough, unused to speaking. One of Dalton's men told me. Thought it was funny. Said my papa was wasting his money on a corpse. You're not a corpse. You're here. You're alive. I'm broken. Michael's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what they did, what they made us do, what I had to do to keep the little ones safe. Jesper's heart ached for this boy who'd had to become a man too soon. You survived. That's what matters. I don't know how to be his son anymore. Michael's voice cracked. I don't even remember what it was like before. I was 7, now I'm 13, and hurt, and scared, and probably angry. Jesper stood and crossed to him. But you're also brave and strong, and you protected 22 other children in that darkness. Your father is going to be so proud of you. What if he dies before I can? Michael couldn't finish the sentence. He won't. Jesper said it with more confidence than she felt. He's survived 6 years of grief and searching and not giving up. He's not going to give up now. That night, Cole's fever spiked. The doctor returned, his face grim. Infection. I've done all I can. Now it's up to him and to God. Jesper sent everyone else away and began the terrible work of trying to bring the fever down. Cold compresses, willow bark tea forced between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. Prayers she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. For 2 days, Cole hovered between life and death. He hallucinated crying out for Elizabeth, for Michael, for people Jesper didn't know. Sometimes he was lucid enough to recognize her. Those moments were worse somehow, seeing the pain in his eyes, the fear that he wouldn't survive to see his son grow up. "Don't leave me," Jesper whispered on the third night, when his breathing had become so shallow she could barely see his chest rise. "Please, Cole, I need to tell you, I need you to know." She pressed her forehead to his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," she said to the silence. "I didn't know it until you fell. Didn't let myself feel it because I was so afraid of losing someone else. But I love you, and you don't get to leave me now. You don't get to tell me you love me and then die. That's not how this works." Cole's eyes flickered open. He looked at her with such clarity, such focus, that for a moment she forgot he was dying. "Jesper," he breathed. "I'm here. I'm right here. Tell Michael." He swallowed hard, the effort clearly costing him. "Tell him I'm sorry, that I tried, that I never stopped. You'll tell him yourself?" Jesper gripped his hand tighter. "You're going to survive this. You're going to get better. And then we're going to San Francisco to find my daughter. Together. Like you promised." "San Francisco," Cole repeated. His eyes were drifting closed again. "Rose." "Yes, Rose. You remember her name." "Blue Ribbon." A ghost of a smile. "You showed me." "I showed you." Jesper was crying again. "And you're going to help me find her. But you have to fight Cole. You have to stay." "Trying," he whispered, so tired. "I know, but don't give up. Please don't give up." His hand squeezed hers weakly. Then his eyes closed and his breathing evened out into something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't quite unconsciousness either. Jesper stayed beside him, holding his hand, willing her strength into him. And somewhere in the darkest hour before dawn, the fever broke. Cole woke on the 5th day to find his son sitting beside his bed. For a moment, he just stared as if he couldn't quite believe Michael was real. Then his hand reached out trembling, and Michael took it. They didn't speak, didn't need to. 6 years of separation, of grief, of desperate searching, all of it distilled into that single moment of connection. Jesper watched from the doorway, her heart too full for words, and quietly left them alone. Cole's recovery was slow. The bullet had come within a hair's breadth of his heart. The infection had nearly killed him. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive, that most men wouldn't have survived. But Cole Brennan was stubborn. He was sitting up within a week, walking within 2, and driving everyone mad with his insistence that he was fine within 3. "You are not fine," Jesper said firmly, catching him trying to sneak out to the barn. "You were shot in the chest. You need rest." "I've been resting for 3 weeks. Cole scowled, but there was no real heat in it. "The ranch needs running." "The ranch is running fine. Your men are perfectly capable." She steered him back toward the house. "Besides, you have more important things to do." "Like what?" "Like getting to know your son." That stopped him. Michael was indeed settling in slowly. He helped with the younger children during the day, teaching them to read the way Jesper had taught him. At night, he sat on the porch and stared at the mountains as if he still couldn't quite believe he was free. But he didn't talk to Cole. Every attempt at conversation ended in awkward silence. The boy would find an excuse to leave, and Cole would watch him go with an expression of such longing it hurt to see. "He doesn't know how to be around me," Cole said quietly. "I'm a stranger to him now." "Then stop being a stranger." Jesper put her hand on his arm. "He's not 7 anymore. You can't expect him to be the boy you remember, but that doesn't mean you can't build something new. What if he doesn't want that? Then you keep trying anyway, the same way you searched for 6 years. You don't give up on the people you love, Cole Brennan. You taught me that." The breakthrough came unexpectedly 3 days later. One of the younger children, a girl of 6 named Lily, woke screaming from a nightmare. Jesper tried to comfort her, but the girl was inconsolable, thrashing and crying and calling for her mother, who was long dead. Michael appeared at the doorway. "Let me," he said quietly. He sat on the edge of Lily's bed and began to sing. It was a lullaby, simple and sweet, in a language Jesper didn't recognize. Michael's voice was rough, unpracticed, but gentle. And slowly Lily's sobs subsided. She curled against him, still hiccuping with tears. and he stroked her hair the way he must have comforted dozens of frightened children in that darkness underground. Cole stood in the hallway watching. When the song ended and Lily had fallen back asleep, Michael looked up and met his father's eyes. "Mama used to sing that to me," Michael said. "When I had bad dreams, I taught it to the others, so they wouldn't be so afraid." "I remember," Cole said hoarsely. "Elizabeth sang it every night." "I tried not to forget." Michael's voice broke. "Tried to remember everything about home, about you, but sometimes the memories would fade and I'd panic thinking I was losing you all over again." Cole crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled his son into his arms. Michael held himself stiff for a heartbeat. Then he collapsed against his father and began to sob great, wrenching cries that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside. Cole held him through it all, murmuring the same words over and over. "I've got you, you're home, you're safe. I've got you." Jesper backed quietly out of the room, tears streaming down her face. 2 weeks after the rescue, Sheriff Hayes arrived at the ranch with news. Victoria Thompson was dead. She'd taken poison in her cell rather than face trial. Frank Dalton had been sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. His entire operation had been dismantled, his assets seized. And there was a letter, found it in Victoria's belongings, Hayes said, handing it to Jesper. "Thought you should see it." Jesper's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing an address in San Francisco and a name, Mr. and Mrs. Charles Ashford, 1247 Pacific Avenue. Below that, in Victoria's precise handwriting, "Sold to the Ashfords, June 1875 for $500. Child was healthy, docile, no complications." Jesper's vision blurred. "That's Rose's address," Cole asked gently. "It's where she was 3 years ago." Jesper pressed the paper to her chest. She could be anywhere by now. The Ashfords could have moved, or she could still be there. Cole's hand found hers. "There's only one way to find out." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He squeezed her hand. "We made a promise, remember, we'd search every street if we had to." "What about Michael, the ranch? You can't just leave." "Michael is healing. He has Agnes. He has the other children. He has men he trusts to protect him." Cole's voice was firm. "And I think he needs some time without me hovering to figure out who he is now." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Sheriff Hayes cleared his throat. "There's a train to San Francisco leaving day after tomorrow. I can have tickets arranged." Jesper looked at the address. The address again? Her daughter. After 3 years of believing her dead, the possibility of seeing her again was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Book them," she said. The city was a shock after Wyoming's emptiness. Buildings crowded against each other, climbing steep hills that made Jesper's legs ache. Cable cars clanged past. The air smelled of salt and fish, and too many people living too close together. 1247 Pacific Avenue turned out to be a grand townhouse in one of the city's finest neighborhoods. Servants' entrance in the back, wrought iron fence, window boxes full of flowers. Jesper and Cole stood across the street staring at it. "What if she doesn't remember me?" Jesper whispered. "Then we remind her slowly, gently." Cole's arm was around her waist, steadying her, one step at a time. They approached the front door together. A butler answered, stiff, formal, regarding them with barely concealed disdain for their travel-worn clothes. "We're here to see Mr. and Mrs. Ashford," Jesper said, trying to keep her voice steady, "about a child who was placed with them 3 years ago. The Ashfords are not receiving visitors." "Please," Jesper's voice cracked. "The child, her name is Rose. Rose Thompson. She's my daughter. She was taken from me and I've been searching." "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." The butler began to close the door. Cole's boot stopped it. "The child was sold to them by a woman named Victoria Thompson. We have documentation, we have proof, and we can make this very public and very messy, or you can let us speak to your employers quietly. Your choice." The butler's jaw tightened. "Wait here." He closed the door. Jesper's heart was beating so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Cole's hand found hers and held tight. After 5 agonizing minutes, the door opened again. A woman stood there, middle-aged, elegantly dressed, with kind eyes that looked worried. "Mrs. Ashford," Jesper assumed. "Please," the woman said quietly. "Come in. But I must warn you, this will not end the way you hope." They followed her into a parlor decorated in shades of rose and cream. Too elegant. Too perfect. Nothing like the warm chaos of the ranch. "We don't have a daughter," Mrs. Ashford said without preamble. "Not anymore." Jesper's world tilted. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, my husband and I, we were desperate for a child. We couldn't conceive. When a woman approached us with an opportunity to adopt a little girl whose mother had died, we didn't ask enough questions. Mrs. Ashford's hands twisted in her lap. We should have, but we wanted a child so badly. Where is she? Jesper demanded. Where is Rose? Her name was Emma. At least that's what we called her. She was 5 years old, blonde, with a birthmark on her right shoulder. Mrs. Ashford looked up with tears in her eyes. She lived with us for 8 months. We loved her so much, but then she got sick. Consumption. The doctors tried everything, but no. Jesper shook her head. No, she can't. She died in January of 1876. We buried her in Laurel Hill Cemetery. Mrs. Ashford stood and crossed to a cabinet, pulling out a small photograph in a silver frame. This is her. She handed it to Jesper. The girl in the photograph was perhaps 5 years old, sitting in a garden with a doll in her lap. Blonde hair and ringlets, a shy smile. And on her right shoulder, visible because of the summer dress, she wore a small birthmark shaped like a butterfly. The same birthmark Rose had been born with. Jesper's legs gave out. She sat down hard, still clutching the photograph, unable to breathe. Rose was dead, really truly dead this time. She'd survived the fire, survived being sold. But consumption had taken her anyway in a strange city with people who weren't her mother. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Ashford was saying through tears. If we'd known she'd been stolen, if we'd had any idea. It's not your fault, Cole said quietly. You gave her a home when she needed one. You loved her, that's what matters. But Jesper couldn't speak, could barely think. All this time, all this hope, all these months of believing, of searching, of daring to dream that she might hold her daughter again. And Rose had been dead for nearly 2 years. May I? Jesper's voice was barely a whisper. May I see where she's buried? Bah! Laurel Hill Cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the bay. Mrs. Ashford led them to a small grave marked with a white marble stone. Emma Ashford, beloved daughter, 1870 to 1876, forever in our hearts. Jesper knelt in the grass, her hands shaking as she touched the cold marble. Her name was Rose, she whispered. Rose Eleanor Thompson. She loved blue ribbons and fairy tales and chocolate cake. She was afraid of thunderstorms but brave about everything else. She was my whole world. She pulled a small wooden box from her pocket and opened it, taking out the blue ribbon she'd carried for 3 years. I'm sorry, she said to the grave. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry you died thinking I'd forgotten you. I'm sorry for everything. She laid the ribbon on the grave, pressing it down so the wind wouldn't take it. Then she stood and walked away, leaving behind the last piece of hope she'd been carrying. Cole found her an hour later sitting on a bench overlooking the bay. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her and waited. Finally, Jesper spoke. I wanted so badly to believe she was alive, even when it made no sense. Even when everyone told me to let go. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was being strong, hopeful, but maybe I was just delusional. You were a mother who loved her daughter, Cole said quietly. There's nothing delusional about that. She died alone, with strangers. She died with people who cared for her, who gave her a home and tried to save her. He took her hand. You can't save everyone, Jesper. God knows I learned that the hard way. But you did everything you could. You never gave up. That means something. Does it? Jesper's voice broke. Michael's alive because you kept searching. But Rose is dead and all my searching changed nothing. Your searching saved 23 other children. Cole turned her to face him. Lily, all the others, they're alive because you refused to ignore what was happening, because you demanded answers, because you made me believe it was possible to fight back. Jesper closed her eyes. I don't feel like I saved anyone. That's grief talking. Give it time. And if time doesn't help, then I'll be here anyway. Cole's voice was steady, certain. For as long as you need me. Jesper leaned into him, letting herself be held, letting herself grieve properly for the first time in 3 years. They sat there until sunset painted the bay gold and pink, until the air turned cold and the stars began to appear. Finally, Jesper spoke again. Take me home. Wyoming? Yes. She looked up at him. There are children there who need us. Michael needs his father, and I need to be somewhere that feels like healing is possible. Cole kissed her forehead. Then let's go home. Spring came to Wyoming like a resurrection. The snow melted, wildflowers bloomed across the valley, and the CB Ranch rang with the sound of children's laughter. Most of the rescued children had been reunited with families. Real families found through careful investigation and Sheriff Hayes' diligent work. But 7 remained children whose parents were truly dead or who couldn't be found. Children who needed a home. The ranch had become that home. Agnes ran the household with military precision, tempered by unexpected gentleness. Michael taught the older children to read and ride. Em, who'd finally started speaking more than whispers, helped with the cooking and tended a garden she'd planted herself. And Jesper? Jesper had found a purpose she hadn't known she needed. Teaching. Not in a schoolhouse, but here in the ranch's converted bunkhouse. Reading and writing and arithmetic, yes, but also healing. Helping these traumatized children learn to be children again. It didn't take away the pain of losing Rose. Nothing could do that. But it gave her a reason to get up each morning, a way to transform her grief into something that mattered. She and Cole had grown closer over the months, slowly, carefully, both of them damaged enough to know better than to rush. They took meals together, worked side by side, spent evenings on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains. And sometimes when the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, he'd take her hand and they'd just sit together in comfortable silence. No promises, no pressure. Just the possibility of something that might someday become love fully realized. And on a warm evening in May, Jesper sat on the porch steps watching Michael teach Lily to rope a fence post. The girl was laughing her fear from those first weeks, replaced by something lighter, hopeful. Cole emerged from the barn and crossed to sit beside her. "Beautiful evening," he observed. "It is." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A ring. It was simple, a silver band with a small turquoise stone. Nothing fancy, but it was perfect. "I'm not proposing," Cole said quickly. "Not yet. I know you're still healing. I know it's too soon." "Then what are you doing?" "Promising." He held the ring up to the fading light. "I promised you we'd search for Rose. We did. I promised you we'd fight for those children. We did. And now I'm promising you something else." "What?" "That when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." He looked at her and his eyes were full of patient devotion. No rush, no expectations, just a promise that I'll wait. Jesper's throat tightened. "What if I'm never ready? What if I'm too broken to love someone the way you deserve?" "Then we'll be broken together." Cole set the ring on the porch railing between them. "This is yours whenever you want it. A year from now, 10 years. Never. I'll wait." Jesper looked at the ring glinting in the sunset, looked at the children playing in the yard, looked at this man who'd lost everything and somehow found a way to hope again. "Cole!" He stood abruptly. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." He started to walk away. "Wait!" Jesper's voice stopped him. She picked up the ring, held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then she slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Cole turned slowly, his expression caught between hope and disbelief. "I'm not saying I'm ready for everything," Jesper said carefully. "I'm not saying I'm healed or whole or done grieving. I know, but I am saying I want to try. With you. If you'll be patient with me." Cole crossed back to her in 3 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I've waited 6 years to find my son," he said quietly. "I can wait however long it takes for you to be ready for this." Then he kissed her soft, sweet, full of promise but not demand. Jesper kissed him back, letting herself feel it. Letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. Could build something new from the ashes of what she'd lost. When they finally pulled apart, Michael was watching from across the yard. For a moment, Jesper worried he'd be upset. But then the boy smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him, and gave his father a thumbs up. Cole laughed, and the sound was so full of joy, it made Jesper's heart ache in the best possible way. 1 year later, the wedding was small. Just family, which now meant Michael and Agnes, and 7 children ranging from 6 to 14. Sheriff Hayes came and Dutch the prospector and a few of the ranch hands who'd helped with the rescue. They held it in the meadow below the ranch house where wildflowers grew thick and the mountains watched over everything. Michael stood beside his father as best man, tall and strong and healing slowly. Em held Jesper's bouquet of wildflowers, her face solemn with the importance of the task. Agnes cried through the entire ceremony. And when the minister asked if they took each other for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, Jesper looked into Cole's eyes and saw their shared past, all the grief and loss and desperate searching. But she also saw their future. Not perfect, not without pain, but together. "I do," she said. "I do," Cole echoed. They kissed while the children cheered, and Agnes dabbed at her eyes, and the Wyoming wind carried the sound of celebration across the valley. Afterward, there was cake and music and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. Jesper stood with Cole's arms around her, watching the children. Their children now in every way that mattered, spinning and laughing in the twilight. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Daniel Reed hadn't died? Cole asked quietly. If you'd gotten off that train and married him like you were supposed to? Jesper thought about it. Sometimes. But then I remember nothing good ever came from the life I thought I was supposed to have. Rose wasn't in the house she was supposed to be in when the fire started. I wasn't in Philadelphia where I was supposed to stay. You weren't content to accept that Michael had died like you were told to believe. We're all where we're supposed to be because we refuse to accept what we were supposed to accept, Cole murmured. Exactly. Jesper leaned back against him. We broke all the rules, questioned all the lies, and found each other in the wreckage. No regrets. She thought of Rose buried in San Francisco under the wrong name. The grief would never entirely fade. She'd learned to accept that. But she also thought of the 7 children asleep in the bunkhouse, safe and loved and healing. Thought of Michael, who'd learned to smile again. Thought of Em, who'd started speaking in full sentences. Thought of this man who'd spent 6 years searching in darkness and somehow found his way back to light. No regrets, she said, just gratitude for second chances. Cole turned her in his arms and kissed her properly, not caring that the children were probably watching and giggling. When they finally pulled apart, Lily ran up with a crown of woven wildflowers. For the bride, she announced, placing it carefully on Jesper's head. The other children gathered around, all of them, wanting to touch the flowers to be part of this moment. Jesper knelt down and pulled them into a hug, these 7 souls she hadn't given birth to, but loved fiercely anyway. Behind her, Cole put his hand on Michael's shoulder, and father and son stood together watching the woman who'd saved them both. The woman who'd come west as cargo, as nothing, as a debt to be paid, and stayed as the one who reminded them all what it meant to hope. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, and subscribe to our channel for more untold Western tales of love, loss, and second chances. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. What did you think of Jesper and Cole's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever held on to hope when everyone told you to let go? We'd love to hear your story. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best things in life come from refusing to accept the ending you're given.